Yeah, let me say there are a few analysts now starting to catch on and understand what the market's about, but really we've got a situation where there's a constipated supply chain, and it is really held to ransom by downstream processing capacity to convert spodumene concentrates to lithium chemicals, and that capacity sits in one country at the moment, and one country only, and that's China. The capacity is limited, and as a consequence, doesn't matter how much spodumene you produce, you can't get it right through to the end user. And many see the primary end user, as being the EV market. The EV market hasn't taken off quite as quickly as people thought it would, and the reason is there's not sufficient lithium chemicals available to produce the battery. So it's not the conventional situation of direct supply and demand, it's the inability to squeeze the available material through the supply chain and get it to the end user. We're going to see some relaxation of that in the not too distant future with the construction of 3 refineries here in Australia, but quite frankly I don't think that's going to keep up with the demand. So I think we've got to start looking at some of the things that I've been talking about, such as improving the sustainability and utilisation of the resources we've got. We can't afford to throw large quantities of lithium away longer term, or any of the other battery metals for that matter, and we need to see more recycling. At the moment, on a global basis, only about 9% of lithium-ion batteries are recycled, and Australians, being so environmentally conscious, are pushing hard to get it over 3. It's absolutely deplorable. We're an incredibly wasteful society, and what we've got to do is get more of that material back into the supply chain. And that, of course, will alleviate the requirements for new material, cobalt in particular, which is probably more critical with many battery chemistries than even lithium is. Oh, by 2030, I'm glad you picked a date that's a fair way out, because I can see a number of problems in that supply chain between now and then. But I think by 2030 the supply chain should be in balance, because there's been so much capital committed to it. There's an enormous amount of capital committed to the construction of battery plants, and if you have a look at the amount of lithium carbonate equivalent that's required to go into the batteries of the vehicles that are legislated to be in place by 2030, and they're the ones that will be replacing internal combustion engines. So if you look at that, it's something like 50 million vehicles, and if you say I'm going to put lithium-ion batteries into 50 million vehicles, you're going to consume something like 3.5 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent. And today we produce a little over 200,000. So by 2030, the demand will be huge. And of course, there's going to be a catch-up as a consequence of those constraints in the supply chain in any case. So look, I see by 2030 the market being incredibly buoyant. No, I don't. And that's why I say quite emphatically that we need to start looking more objectively at recycling those materials and processing materials that otherwise would go to waste. Well, of course, we cover all sectors of the lithium industry, or to some extent almost all sectors of the battery industry, with the way we've set up the business. We have intentionally looked at the overlaps in those business divisions and the constraints of going from, for example, production through to lithium chemicals, and then lithium chemicals through to cathode powders. And the technologies that we have developed take out a number of steps at those interfaces. So that will enable the process to be vertically integrated, and in doing so, remove some of the processing steps and remove some of the cost. And I think that's critical, because if you look at the supply chain at the moment, it is fragmented. You've got the concentrate producers. They produce a concentrate, they make a profit. They sell it to a chemical producer who wants a profit. They sell it to a cathode powder producer who wants a profit. They sell it to a cathode manufacturer who wants a profit, and then sells the cathode to the battery manufacturer who also wants a profit. So you've got half a dozen profit centres on the way through. And while you've got half a dozen profit centres and pretty efficient production, there's no way you can drop the price much lower than it is at the moment. So vertical integration is the key to dropping that price, and I think we have some of the keys to the vertical integration.